They were two gifted doctors working on a cure for cancer.
He had sterling academics and was having a successful career in his chosen field.
She chose to be an oncologist because several family members were touched by cancer.
But a mysterious illness would bring their collaboration to a sudden end.
He was going into kidney failure. Several of his organs were starting to fail.
This was a medical mystery. They were testing for everything under the sun.
The subsequent investigation would expose a chilling cause and a love triangle gone wrong.
This was a case about jealousy and fatal attraction gone awry.
This wasn't just a woman scorned, this was a woman scorched.
January 27th, 2013, Houston, Texas. It's nearly midnight when a man is brought into the emergency room of the MD Anderson Cancer Center at the University of Texas.
This is a world-renowned cancer hospital. They don't have a lot of walk-ins at their emergency room.
He wasn't making a whole lot of sense. He was in an altered state of mind.
The ER physicians are having a difficult time figuring out who he is and what's wrong with him. Luckily, two women that appeared shortly after he arrived helped.
One of them was his longtime living girlfriend, Yvette Tony, and the other was his research partner, Dr. Anna Gonzalez Angulo.
The two women identify him as Dr. George Blumenshine, a member of staff at the University Center.
Turns out he's a very prominent cancer researcher at this hospital, at MD Anderson.
The doctors immediately admitted him to run a series of tests to figure out what was wrong.
They thought maybe he was having a stroke. They did various neurological tests.
The tests are all negative. Meanwhile, Dr. Blumenshine's condition continues to worsen.
The lab work showed an unusual high level of acid in his blood, which was causing kidney damage. He was immediately transferred to intensive care.
He was going into kidney failure. Several of his organs were starting to fail, so he was in grave condition.
They're just trying to sort out exactly what's going on and don't really have a clue.
By the time the mystery is solved, it will no longer be just a medical problem, but a matter for police as well. "48-year-old George Blumenshine had been following in his family's footsteps when he first entered the medical profession.
He comes from a family where his father was a renowned doctor himself, who known the world over. So he kind of grew up around high-profile doctor community.
Got his BA from Vanderbilt. He got his medical degree from University of Texas Medical School here in Houston, and ended up going into cancer research and studied cancers of the neck and the throat.
After medical school, George decided to stay in Houston to pursue his career.
For the type of research George was doing, he could not have picked a better place. The Texas Medical Center complex is the largest of its kind in the world.
MD Anderson is a premier cancer institution. It is a hospital and teaching center that really is focused on ending cancer. It is a place where people come from all over the world to be treated because they have the cutting edge, and it gives you the best chance at life.
But professional success wasn't the only thing he found there. In 2003, George fell in love with a fellow doctor named Yvette Tony.
Dr. Yvette Tony was an epidemiologist. She's a highly educated person herself, just a different side of the medical field.
They had a lot in common. She was just as brilliant and accomplished as he was. So they hit it off really well. They seemed to grow even closer over the years. 2007 was an important year for them. Yvette landed her dream job with a pharmaceutical company, and they decided to move in together.
Although they were never married, in 2012, George and Yvette made a different life decision.
They wanted to take the next step, and that next step for them was to try to have a child.
Normally, there would be nothing wrong with that, but Yvette did face challenges getting pregnant.
They were both in their late 40s, so it was a little late to have a child. So, they tried to use IVF.
There's, various procedures that Yvette had to go through in their quest to have a child.
Their persistence seemed to pay off. In May of 2012, Yvette learned she was pregnant with twins, but it would end in heartbreak.
Yvette Toney suffered a miscarriage. And when that happened, that was devastating for both Dr. Blumenshine and Yvette Toney.
They were still trying to recover from that loss. It's a very difficult thing for any couple to get over.
Now, just 4 months later, George has been admitted to intensive care, and the couple is dealing with another life-threatening medical emergency.
Dr. George Blumenshine was taken to the emergency center in the late evening. He was in critical condition.
Once your kidneys go, things start shutting down pretty fast. And they realize that he is probably going to die. So they put him on dialysis.
They could not figure out what was wrong with Dr. Blumenshine until it was almost too late.
The next day, there is finally a breakthrough.
A nurse was changing his urine bag when she noticed that there was this white sediment in the urine. So she sent it over to a kidney specialist for testing.
He took it to his lab and put a sample under the microscope, and he realized, he could see crystals. And he was amazed because he knew what that meant.
Coming up, a mysterious illness becomes a criminal investigation.
It just didn't make any sense because either he drank it himself or was poisoned, which is just too far-fetched to believe.
Dr. George Blumenshine, a 48-year-old cancer researcher, has been admitted to intensive care after his kidneys mysteriously began shutting down. And after a battery of tests, doctors have isolated the cause.
It wasn't until the nephrologist, the kidney doctor, looked under the microscope and saw these calcium oxalate crystals and thought, oh my goodness, this is what's going on. He has been poisoned. Because there are not really very many things that can cause calcium oxalate crystals in the urine.
It's a telltale sign of ethylene glycol poisoning, which is consistent with his other symptoms. Those symptoms include intoxication, stomach pain, and kidney failure. You can die from ingesting even a small amount.
And it just didn't make any sense because this is basically antifreeze. An adult doesn't drink it, much less, a world-renowned doctor.
The hospital immediately notifies police. Investigator Max Sosa is assigned to the case.
I made my way over to intensive care where he was located. He wasn't able to be responsive to any type of questioning. It was just his physical condition.
What normally kills somebody in ethylene glycol poisoning is not just the kidney failure, but it is the metabolic derangements that occur. Death can occur from a life-threatening heart rhythm and arrhythmia.
Because of the circumstances of not knowing what we had, it was real touch and go.
With George out of commission, the next step is to talk to those closest to him.
The detective begins with George's longtime girlfriend, Yvette Toney.
Since it looked like a poisoning case, the authorities wanted to know what he had eaten and what he had drank.
When I initially met Yvette Toney, she was very nice. She appeared to be forthcoming. We tried to get a time frame of when they had eaten together.
Yvette says she has no idea how he could have been poisoned. They'd shared a meal just the night before, when George returned from a medical conference.
They had gotten takeout from a well-known Greek restaurant here in Houston, drank a bottle of wine, and went to bed. Everything seemed fine.
She showed no symptoms that were anything similar to what George Blumenshine was experiencing. So That led me to believe that I could possibly rule out anything that they had consumed or drank together.
That morning, George had left for work, even though it was a weekend.
He got up, drank a glass of orange juice, and then went out the door to go work with Dr. Gonzalez Angulo.
They had been working together long hours on a project, a research paper.
There was no signs that there was anything wrong with him. There was no slurring of his speech. Nothing was wrong with his gait. He just appeared to be normal.
But Yvette says that when she called George later that day, something didn't seem right.
She said that the first time that she spoke with him, it was somewhere around noon, 1 o'clock, and he was complaining of his head hurting. The second time that she talked to him, she indicated that she could already hear a slur in his speech at that point. She was concerned that he was displaying symptoms of possibly having a stroke.
Some time goes by and she still hasn't heard from him, so she starts to get worried. She tried calling him several times in the next few hours, but he never picked up.
Yvette tells police that George was scheduled to have a dinner meeting that night with several other physicians, including Dr. Ana Gonzalez Angulo. So around 10 p.m., she finally tried contacting Ana at home.
Yvette was able to reach Dr. Gonzalez Angulo on her phone and ask what the heck was going on. And Dr. Gonzalez Angulo said, I think it's fine. George is acting weird, though.
Yvette Tony, she's asking what condition he's in and why hasn't he gone to the doctor yet. Dr. Gonzalez Angulo's response was that George was uncontrollable. She wasn't able to convince him to go to the doctor.
Yvette tells Dr. Gonzalez Angulo, stay there, I'm coming to get him and I'll take him to the hospital.
But Yvette says that by the time she arrived at Anna's home, George had already left.
George was driving himself to the hospital. The reaction that Yvette Tony had at that point was she just couldn't understand how Dr. Gonzalez Angulo allowed him to drive his vehicle in the condition that he was in.
Apparently, he just took the keys and left. There wasn't much she could do to stop him. So Anna and Yvette both drive over to MD Anderson, where they find George sitting on a bench.
He basically had driven himself to the parking garage where he normally parked. They were trying to urge him to get to the hospital, and he was reluctant. His speech was slurred. He was incoherent.
To convince George he needed help, Yvette recorded him slurring on her phone while she and Anna talked to him.
He's trying to act normal, like nothing's wrong, and he just looks like a drone. She takes it for, her own edification to show him later, this is why I made you go.
Why don't you stand up and introduce yourself?
Last 8 hours or so, I've gotten progressively discoordinated.
His speech, his reaction, his movements, it all appeared that he wasn't understanding at all what was going on. They actually had to call emergency center personnel to come and get him.
George, Josiah, how you doing? Good, how are you? I'm fine. I think I'm fine. Just thinking sure. Hydrated. Yeah, let's go hydrate you then.
More than 8 hours after his symptoms first appeared, George was finally admitted to the ER. But was it already too late?
What was difficult in not being able to talk to the victim was he was the one who knew who he was in contact with, what he had eaten, what he had drank. Without any of that information available to us, it was a delay in leading us to where we needed to go.
Maybe it was a patient that was upset and going after doctors at MD Anderson, somebody that didn't get cured and was going to die anyway. It was just such an unbelievable crime to poison somebody with, such a coarse substance.
Coming up, hospital rumors lead to a surprising new suspect.
It seemed to be the worst-kept secret at the hospital.
It has been several hours since Dr. George Blumenshine was diagnosed with severe chemical poisoning, and investigators are trying to determine who could have done it.
The actual chemical that was used was ethylene glycol. That's commonly known to be used in antifreeze. However, it was used in its pure form, and that is commonly used in laboratories.
It seemed very unlikely that an experienced doctor would accidentally ingest it. And it just so happens that Dr. Blumenshine didn't even work in a lab.
Did that mean the suspect might be working at the hospital?
We looked at the possibility of someone eliminating somebody just so they could take credit for the research.
We looked into every possibility, but every possibility was not a probability.
Meanwhile, George continues to fight for his life.
He was so sick, he was near death.
The investigation has only just begun when it hits an unexpected roadblock. George's girlfriend, Yvette Toney, has been helpful to detectives so far, but now she suddenly seems to have a change of heart.
She indicated that she was going to have to confer with an attorney. It was surprising because that was going to hinder our process in the investigation. Was she being protective or was she trying to hide something?
Yvette Toney was absolutely a suspect. We did not rule out or rule in anyone until we had all the facts.
And when police try to interview George's research partner, Dr. Ana Gonzalez Angulo, they find her equally evasive.
When trying to even make contact, even in a phone call, it was very difficult. It took several days before I was able to arrange a meeting with her.
Could both women have something to hide? Hoping to find answers, detectives turn to George's colleagues, and what they learn is surprising.
The other doctors say that he's a well-respected member of the faculty. They have no idea who will want to harm him, but he does have a secret.
This was a guy who was having an affair, who had kept it from his long-term live-in girlfriend with whom he was trying to have a child, who was engaged in a relationship with Dr. Gonzalez.
At age 41, Dr. Ana Gonzalez Angulo had come a long way from her humble beginnings.
Dr. Gonzalez was born and grew up in Popayan, Colombia. Her parents had 3 children. They grew up on a ranch, producers of coffee and fruit and cattle. So it was a hardworking family.
Like George, she decided to go into medicine because of her family members.
She chose specifically to be an oncologist because several family members were touched by cancer.
After medical school in Colombia and a residency in Florida, Anna landed at MD Anderson in 2003. She quickly rose to be one of the hospital's shining stars.
Dr. Gonzalez Angulo was world-renowned for her cancer research. She had patients, she had saved their lives. They loved her.
It was very evident to me personally that she took care in my well-being. We were going to cure cancer, my cancer. What distinguishes her from being a good physician to a great physician is that you know that you're in good hands.
She and George met shortly after she arrived to the hospital. It seemed like a good partnership.
Dr. Gonzalez Angulo and Dr. Blumenshine both had an incredible passion to search for cures for cancer. That certainly brought them closer together in both their research and in their personal lives.
By 2013, the two colleagues were spending most of their time together, in and out of the lab.
They went on trips together, on speaking engagements or conventions.
They went to remote places, I want to say Vietnam to Ecuador. And in fact, not long before this all transpired, they were in Colombia on business.
These people were working at least 60 hours a week, sometimes a lot more. It seems like it would have been easy to, blur the lines between, professional boundaries and the more personal boundaries.
Rumor was, that's exactly what happened.
The suggestion was made by several doctors that there was more than just friendship going on.
There was an incident where a colleague walked in and she was sitting on his lap in his office. It emerged that she was really flirty with him a lot of the time.
Dr. Blumenstein would call Dr. Gonzalez Angulo his little princess. They had pet names for each other. You know, it was definitely a two-way street when it came to romantic mingling.
The possibility of an affair might explain Anna's reluctance to talk to police, and it raises even more questions about George's girlfriend.
Did Yvette Tony know that he was cheating on her? Was she angry about that?
Most crimes either happen because of sex or money, and if money wasn't an issue, they were about to start looking for sex.
We had to take into consideration that this could have been a scorned lover because of the parent love triangle that we had going on.
Coming up, details of the affair threaten to turn the investigation upside down.
He makes this sort of hospital bed confession.
As George Blumenstein continues to fight for his life at MD Anderson Hospital, detectives have just learned that their victim has been living a double life for 2 years. But is George's affair with his research partner the reason why he was poisoned?
What finally emerged was this really twisty tale of a doctor who was cheating on his girlfriend with another doctor. The police went through that and said, you know, maybe it's Yvette Tony. Maybe she has found out about the affair.
The more the investigators spoke to George's colleagues, the more it seemed like the worst kept secret in the hospital.
Yvette has gotten a lawyer and stopped talking to police. But a few days later, detectives finally get a chance to sit down with the other woman in this alleged love triangle, Dr. Anna Gonzalez Angulo.
We had a lengthy interview. I asked her about her schedule, his schedule. I asked her about them eating or drinking anything while they were together, and what his mannerisms were when she was with him for that day. She didn't provide anything that was damaging to her other than the fact that she provided him coffee to drink.
He didn't start displaying any symptoms until the afternoon. And by the evening, he was so intoxicated that his colleagues thought he was having a stroke.
When they get around to asking her about the affair, she completely denies it.
She was forthcoming about the amount of time that they spent together. She told me that they were very close friends. I asked if there was more, and she just referred to themselves as very close friends.
Although Anna claims there was no affair, she's well aware of the rumors. She tells investigators that her partnership with George has caused her serious problems.
She described threatening letters, there were threatening phone calls. They all had the common thread of stay away from Dr. Blumenstein, you're too close to him, stay away.
She even indicated that there was a point where she had gone out to check her mail, and she was taken to the ground and punched and kicked. When the assault occurred, she called George Blumenstein, and he and Yvette Tony both offered a place for her to stay. They supposedly urged her to go to the police, and she put it off for a time.
The police report appears to confirm the attack.
I was provided with photos of what appeared to be bruising to her face and her abdomen. She described a man and a woman, both African American.
After he was poisoned, those threats and those letters suddenly became Exhibit A.
This all seems to point at Yvette as a potential suspect. If she thought that there was an affair, she might be trying to get back at them.
Investigators are only left with more questions, but thankfully, they're about to get some of them answered.
They got word from the ICU that George was going to pull through. There was kidney damage, but he's going to survive. He doesn't say much while he's recovering in the hospital, but the detectives were able to talk to him after he was released a few weeks later.
It occurred to me that interviewing him at his home or at his office wasn't the ideal or most comfortable place to speak with him. So I convinced him to take a ride with me in my police vehicle. It's an unmarked vehicle, just something that he would have been comfortable in. So we went for a drive and we had a lengthy conversation. He finally provided me a definite timeline, came clean with his affair that had been going on with Ana Maria Gonzalez Angulo. The fact that Yvette Tony had no idea that anything was going on between them.
According to George, the affair had been Anna's idea.
Ana Maria Gonzalez Angulo was the one that pursued him. She was the one that reached out to him. She was the one that suggested that they work on research together, that they travel to conventions together.
And then things started getting a lot less professional.
At first, George tried to keep their relationship professional. After all, he had a live-in girlfriend. But after constant temptation, he finally gave in.
In 2011, Dr. Blumenshine and Dr. Gonzalez Angulo began their affair. They were at a conference in Sweden together, and that's when they first started their sexual relationship.
George tells detectives that he regrets his infidelity and has already told Yvette about it.
Dr. Blumenshine was absolutely remorseful for his actions, and he owned them.
He makes this sort of hospital bed confession to his girlfriend and says, I need to tell you that I'm having an affair. And it's with Dr. Gonzalez Angulo.
When investigators asked Yvette about it later, she admitted to having turned a blind eye to it. Even if Yvette knew about the affair, George insists that she would have never tried to poison him. There would have only been one person who would have tried to do that.
Coming up, a jealous lover carries out her deadly plan.
Dr. Blumenshine said that the coffee was incredibly sweet.
Months after the near-fatal poisoning of Dr. George Blumenshine, investigators believe they have a solid suspect, his research partner, Dr. Ana Gonzalez Angulo.
This case had more twists and turns than a Rubik's Cube. To put it all together was not easy, but when you finally got it, it was crystal clear.
So they've been looking at Yvette because they thought that she was jealous of Anna. But George thinks it was the other way around.
George says his suspicions first began when he confided in Anna about the tragedy of Yvette's miscarriage.
Her reaction was, well, I can have a baby for you. That was her first offer when he provided her that information.
She had told him that she could have the child in Colombia and come back and he could be the uncle.
It's amazing to think that she would possibly just try to be a surrogate for them. What a friend.
George declined the offer. Soon after, Anna began telling him that she was getting threats about their relationship.
Ana Maria Gonzalez Angulo informed George Blumenshine that she started receiving letters and phone calls suggesting that she stay away from George.
It was pretty clear to me what she was doing is she was threatening and harassing herself to try to drive a wedge between Dr. Blumenshine and Yvette.
That strategy hadn't worked. But how much further had Anna been willing to go?
George is convinced that Anna is the one that poisoned him because of the way his illness progressed over the course of the day.
George Blumenshine described January 27th as being a day where he woke up in the early morning hours, and the point on his agenda was to go over to Ana Maria Gonzalez's townhome, pick her up, and they would both go to the office to do research.
George says Anna had something else in mind.
She apparently pulled him into the bedroom where they engaged in sexual activity. Afterwards, they had breakfast, and Anna gave him a cup of coffee that tasted unusually sweet.
Being a person that he spent hours with, she knew exactly how he took his coffee. He drank his coffee black, unsweetened.
He takes a few sips and says, I can't drink it, it's too sweet. And she keeps forcing it on him. Drink this coffee, it's from my homeland, it's from my homeland.
She told him how special that coffee was. He could never have imagined how special it was indeed.
Ethylene glycol by nature is very, very sweet. It is an age-old poison that individuals have used to harm others.
This strange tale of the special coffee that's extremely sweet is surely, to us, was clear that that was the moment that he was poisoned.
Based on George's testimony, it didn't really seem like there was any other explanation.
I went back and I asked him about the wine that he had drank with Yvette Tony just to rule it out. I asked him if there was any distinct sweetness to the wine. And he said no, that there wasn't. So the only thing at that point that he had consumed from the previous night to that morning was the coffee. And that was the only thing that he consumed that would have had the sweetness that ethylene glycol would have produced.
Detectives theorize that when it finally became clear George would never leave his girlfriend, Anna snapped.
Dr. Gonzalez Angulo knew she was losing Dr. Blumenshine. There's no doubt in my mind the affair meant way more to her than it did to him.
She wanted to have a child with him. She wanted to be with him. He was living with another woman, and I think sort of stringing her along.
Dr. Gonzalez Angulo wanted to kill Dr. Blumenshine because if she couldn't have him, she didn't want anyone to have him.
Now, they just have to find a way to prove it.
We were waiting for a detailed report from the chemist. We had to establish timelines of how what he ingested would have metabolized and what the time frame would have been.
We got with the experts, and when we looked at the timeline, there was only one thing that was off. It was that coffee, and the timeline fit like a glove.
The amount of time that ethylene glycol takes to metabolize in the body, that would have ruled out Yvette Tony because of the time frame where he started exhibiting the symptoms.
He would have been well into metabolic acidosis and renal failure by the time that he had presented to the hospital. So the timeline does not fit at all that Yvette was the poisoner, not to mention the fact that she would have not had access to ethylene glycol from a laboratory.
On May 29, 2013, 4 months after George was poisoned, Anna is arrested on her way to work.
I told her that she was under arrest for the aggravated assault by means of poisoning of Dr. George Blumenshine. She said that I had it all wrong, and my response to her at that point was, "You can't beat science." And she dropped her head, and I believe she responded, "No, you can't."
Coming up, the jury hears new evidence captured by the victim himself.
Some of those recordings were chilling.
On September 15, 2014, the trial of 43-year-old Dr. Anna Gonzalez Angulo gets underway. She stands accused of poisoning her lover, Dr. George Blumenshine.
This wasn't just a woman scorned, this was a woman scorched. She was looking for vengeance.
If convicted, Anna could face up to life in prison.
George's credibility definitely came into question during trial. You know, here's a man who wants to play the victim.
Are you proud of what you did with the defendant without...
No, I regret it deeply.
Whether the jury liked him or did not like him wasn't the issue. The issue was you had a man, a doctor, whose maybe only fault was not being faithful to his longtime girlfriend.
Despite her conflicting emotions, Yvette provides the prosecution with compelling testimony.
I trusted her. I trusted him. I felt stupid. I felt betrayed.
Yvette Tony provided the antidote to the jury for their hatred of Dr. Blumenshine. She would never harm this man. You could look at her and see, and she told the jury she felt like a fool for not realizing that this was going on. Yvette Tony was credible and crucial.
I kept thinking to myself, you're gonna make me look like a complete idiot. No one said anything to me about this.
She stated that after George confessed about the affair, he also shared his suspicions about Anna.
George said, Yvette, do not poke the dragon. I think she poisoned me, and I don't want to say anything until I know for certain or we have some sort of proof.
They think, well, we're going to just sort of PI this stuff ourselves, be our own personal private investigators. So they start calling and getting her on the line to try to admit that she's done something wrong.
It turned out George recorded those phone calls, and they're now played for the jury in court.
Why in Christ will I ever hurt you? Why?
Why would Yvette hurt me?
I don't know. I don't know you two. I don't know what's behind you two.
On the tapes, Anna tried to shift the blame to Yvette, just as she had done with the police.
If I tell you that I have enough circumstantial evidence to press charges, will you believe me?
No.
I will. I do.
Against Yvette?
Yes.
Dr. Gonzalez Angulo could never provide the evidence and the supporting documentation to the claims that she made.
According to the state, Anna had fabricated everything, including the claim that she was beaten.
When we started looking, and we looked at all the details and everything, it didn't match up.
The colors of the bruising didn't match. It didn't fit that the strikes to the face occurred at the same time strikes to the abdomen did.
She beat herself up. That is what she did. It's sad, but it's true.
Prosecutors argue that the toxicology report proved that Anna was the only one that could have poisoned George.
We had a mountain of evidence against Dr. Gonzalez Angulo, and we had the best kind of evidence. We had science.
The science proved that he was poisoned with ethylene glycol, and it was done at a time when this coffee was administered to him.
The defense doesn't agree. They argue that the science is anything but conclusive.
There was evidence presented during trial that the ingestion of any harming substance could have occurred even the day before or the days before when Dr. Blumenshine was with Yvette Toney.
The defense, however, challenged the idea that Anna was as obsessed with George as he made her out to be. The affair wasn't as serious as he thought.
You can see this sort of web that the prosecution spun of there being some fatal attraction. But honestly, the evidence showed just the opposite, that Dr. Gonzalez viewed that relationship incredibly casually.
My understanding of the relationship was it was a mutually satisfactory sexual relationship. So I don't believe she was ever looking for something deeper.
The defense also draws attention to many holes in the case against Anna, including a lack of due diligence in the investigation.
There were so many issues, whether it was the scientific evidence, whether it was the lack of investigation into the various suspects, whether it was the veracity of the witnesses that the state brought, whether it was sort of the overreaching nature of the prosecution's, very dramatic case.
But what would the jury believe? After deliberating for 2 days, they finally reach a decision.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Ana Maria Gonzalez Angulo, guilty of aggravated assault of a person with whom the defendant had a dating relationship.
We asked for a lot of prison time because she had basically stolen years from Dr. Blumenshine.
Dr. Blumenshine has permanent lasting kidney damage. His kidneys don't work at full capacity. He has to watch what he eats and how much he drinks, and his life expectancy is probably shorter based on having the damaged kidneys. She was sentenced to 10 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice.
In her jealousy, Anna had not only hurt the man she loved, but ended a promising career as well.
She cried, not just for herself and her life, but maybe even more so for her parents, for her family. Had she known this would lead to this, I don't think she would have been with him.
Everyone loses. Dr. Blumenshine has lost a piece of life that he can't get back, and his life is forever altered. And women all over the world have lost someone who had the ability to cure and help breast cancer.